So 2 weeks ago, I just hit the big 600-pound milestone on squats, 602 pounds to be exact, 273.18 kilos, and I did it at a body weight of 195 pounds, making it just over 3 times my body weight. The video of that whole squat session is linked in the info box below in case you guys missed it and want to check it out. It's pretty hyped up. Anyway, thought it'd be a perfect time to share what I know about squats and help out anyone who wants to learn. Welcome to the video, guys. If you like this free information, please just support by giving this video a thumbs up and leave a comment below. Let me know what other topics you want me to cover that are strength related. If you feel so inclined, share this video. I want to try to get as many people free information as possible, so we just need YouTube to circulate this video. So the squat, there are 2 common styles of squatting. There's high bar squats and there are low bar squats. High bar squats are where the barbell is on top of your traps by the base of your neck. Low bar squats are where the barbell is lower down your back, about midway down your traps, resting on top of your rear delts. It's further down your back and closer to your hips. Now the high bar squat is by far the most popular style of squatting. It's the style that most of us learned how to squat in and probably still squat with to this day. It's definitely the style that's used in Olympic lifting, and it's used in a lot of sport specific training as well, and for good reason. The low bar squat is a little bit more exclusive to just the powerlifting community. Powerlifting, perhaps strongmen, but it's mainly only used by people who are in a sport of absolute strength because it typically allows you to leverage the most amount of weight possible in a squat. 95% of people will be able to squat more weight in a low bar squat than they will in a high bar squat. There are a few exceptions to that, but that's the average. Now there are pros and cons to both, and I think both can be used interchangeably for strength and power. If you squat low bar, incorporating a high bar day can have tremendous carryover. The pros and cons is a discussion that go on forever and ever and ever and can be dependent on a person's build. So we'll save that for another video. As a loose blanket generalization, the high bar squat typically involves a more upright torso and tends to activate the quads more than the low bar. The low bar squat requires a forward tilt of the torso and tends to focus on the posterior chain, the hamstrings, the glutes, the lower back, the quote unquote deadlift muscles. In this video today, I'm going to go over how to do the low bar squat, how to actually master the low bar positioning, how to feel comfortable in it, and how to excel in it. The most important part of a squat is a straight bar path. If you're standing upright with the bar on you, ready to squat, from a side point of view, if you trace that bar from top to bottom and back up to the top again, you should have a nice straight line, almost 90 degrees exactly. There should be no curves, dents, deviations, and it should be within 3 to 5 degrees of 90 degrees. We are humans, it may vary slightly, but it should be pretty close to 90 degrees, and it should definitely be very straight. The way to achieve this is by getting the barbell over your center of gravity. So if you have the bar on your back, ready to squat, and you're standing straight up from a side view, you should be able to trace that barbell from the top of the bar down through the center of your feet, cutting through the arches of your feet. That line represents your exact center of gravity, and that's where the bar has to stay the entire time. That center of gravity line, that bar path, is king. Your body is now just the servant, and the servant has to bend around the king. So when you start squatting, that bar needs to trace that line. No matter how far back your hips move or how far forward your torso comes, the bar has to stay in line. If you stand straight upright with a low bar position, suddenly the weight is behind that line. That's no good. The weight's behind your center of gravity. You're gonna fall backwards. To compensate, you have to tilt your torso forward. Now the barbell's back in that center of gravity. However, if you just tilt your torso forward, keeping your legs where they were, you're gonna end up falling too far forward once you begin squatting. That's no good. The barbell's gonna fall in front of the center of gravity, messing you up. So, when the front comes forward, the back has to go backwards. Balance. So we gotta hinge the hips. We hinge the hips like a deadlift to push that torso forward slightly, and that's in turn gonna push our hips back behind us ever so slightly. It doesn't need to be extreme, but now we have a nice balance going on. There's as much of our body in front of the bar path as there is behind the bar path. Our bar is center of gravity and still in line with our king line. So let's get into the setup. You want to grip the bar as close to your shoulders as possible. You want to have your hands as close to your body as you physically can. The further out they go, the easier it's going to be for your upper back to get loose on you and make you fold over in the middle of a rep. Now you will see some guys with their arms way out to either end of the bar. Usually it's really, really big dudes, over 300-pound lifters usually. And this is simply because they're so damn big, they don't have the mobility or ability to get their hands in close like that. So they're really their only comfortable option, but they're big enough to where they make it work well for themselves. If you're a smaller built frame and you have the mobility to get your hands in, it's going to be so much more beneficial for you to get those hands as close to your shoulders as possible. And there's no right or wrong way to do it. It just depends on your mobility. So if you're able to get your hands right against the sides of your delts, awesome. The best way to get your shoulders super tight is by finding your grip first. And you're going to have to experiment with this, trial and error, but get your grip as close to shoulder width as you can. You may find it's too close or too far away, but you'll figure it out. Once you have it though, get your grip cemented first. Then bring your shoulders in, because your grip's not gonna go anywhere and it's gonna force that tightness. Because right now, your shoulders are pinched so tight that if you let go of that grip, your hands are dying to scoot outward like this. So what happens is, if you try to get under this bar, loose-handed, and get your shoulders first, right? Get your shoulders nice and tight first, and then bring your hands in, you're not gonna be able to get them in as tight. So right now, mark where I'm at. My ring fingers are on the rings. That's as tight as I can get my hands in, starting with my shoulders. But if I bring my hands in first, even closer, get them cemented, then go into position, I can keep them nice and tight like that. I do recommend wrist wraps for low bar squatting as well. It's gonna help save you elbow pain, wrist pain, and even some shoulder pain, because when you do a normal high bar squat, the bar is right here. So your hands can stay kind of even with your body, and your elbows can even go a little bit in front of you pretty comfortably. But when you're low bar squatting, the bar is behind you. So now your hands are forced to go behind you, and your elbows are back behind you, and you're supporting a whole lot of weight tightly like this. So that's gonna put a lot of torque and tension on your elbow back here, on your wrists, and on your shoulders even. So I do find that wrist wraps really help take a lot of that tension off of your wrist, and it carries over to your elbows nicely as well. It tends to benefit the whole entire arms to have that stabilization up in the wrist. So I use wrist wraps. I personally use the 36-inch Gangsta wraps from Slingshot. They're the same wrist wraps I use for benching. I love them. They are competition approved. I'll put a link for them in the info box below. There is a discount code, Nick10, gets you 10% off on them if you're interested. But any sort of wrist wrap will do, as long as it's gonna give you some good support. Even if you feel like you don't need them, I still recommend it just for the sake of longevity. You don't wanna be old and have your joints ache because you didn't take care of them when you were young. For knee sleeves, I recommend them as well. They don't really assist your squat like knee wraps do. They just make your knees feel like $1,000,000,000 by compressing them. They make the joints warm up and stay fluid throughout the entire workout. I use the Gangsta sleeves, which are 9.5 millimeters thick. Slingshot does have IPF approved sleeves as well. The X sleeves and the Strong sleeves are both IPF approved and great. Link and discount for those as well in the info. So this is just to help you picture the positioning. This is not how you should set up, but just to picture the positioning of the bar. That bar should be midway down your traps over the center of your rear delts if you're just standing upright, relaxed. So then from there, picture retracting your shoulders like you're about to bench press, and also retracting the traps and the lats. Basically, flexing your traps as hard as you possibly can to show off. What's gonna happen is this is gonna bring your shoulders backwards and slightly downwards, and it's gonna slide those rear delts underneath that bar. And that's where the bar is gonna sit. It's called your rear delt shelf. It's gonna be wedged in the middle of your traps and on top of those rear delts. And you're gonna have that grip on the bar nice and tight with those elbows back, pushing those shoulders out to keep that shelf nice and tight. And this is gonna be so dependent on how tight you keep your back. See, what happens if I'm here and I let my shoulders come loose at all? They go forward. And if your shoulders go forward, they're gonna slide right out from underneath that bar is gonna fall down on you. Or if you just let them go loose a little bit, you're still gonna have more wiggle room in that bar to be rolling around on top of your back, which can be problematic, especially with heavy weight. It's gonna mess up your reps. So how to actually get in this position? Imagine doing a behind the neck pull down, but just for your traps. So your lats are tucked away, right? No big flaring lats. Your lats are as narrow as possible. You're tucking them away behind you nice and tight. And you're just trying to get that pump directly in the bottom of your traps. What do? You start off first by retracting your shoulders, right? Shoulders come back for all back movements. So your shoulders are retracted, nice and tight. Traps are already flexed here. Then using your lats, You're using your lats to pull those elbows down towards your body. And because you're going behind your neck, where do the elbows go? They go back. They go down and back behind you. And I want you to imagine you're bringing that bar all the way down till it touches your rear delts. But you're still flexing, you're still trying to get that pump. You have Flex magazine behind you for a photo shoot. You're trying to show them how jacked your traps and upper back can look. That is how a low bar squat should be, except in a low bar squat, you're not bringing the bar to you, you're bringing your body to the bar. But in the same way, you're retracting the shoulders, you're retracting the traps and the lats, and you're using all those muscles to suck that bar into your body. And I want you to picture, once it's on top of your rear delts, you're trying to bend that bar around your body. You're super strong, you're trying to bend that bar in half around the front of your body. So with that tight grip, you're then going to flex your lats, you're gonna contract your lats and use your lats to just cock your elbows down. Just focus on sucking the elbows in towards your body. You're just flexing the lats. I'm not consciously sitting here trying to move my arm, I'm just flexing the lats and pulling those elbows in towards my lats. Now, some people will say that the arms have to be totally 90 degrees vertical. It's not true. It's usually impossible with a low bar squat. You'll see plenty of big squatters who do low bar squat, move big weight, and have their elbows out pretty far behind them. The rule of thumb is you just want to have them cocked in and forward as tightly as you can. So if mobility is an issue for you and you can only bring them in half an inch, that's fine, that's enough. You just wanna make sure they're tight and they're cocked in. Those elbows are being sucked into your lats at all times to keep those arms nice and tight. So now instead of bending the bar forward around you, now you're trying to bend that bar downward around you. You're still bending that bar down towards the front, but now it's going downward. So you're using those lats to suck the elbows in towards them, which is gonna suck your hands down like this. And that's how you want to do it. That's going to wedge that bar into a nice tight position and hold it on top of those rear delts for good. It's not going to go anywhere. The other thing these tight elbows will do is it's going to help you stay upright, especially when you're grinding out a rep. If your elbows are out here behind you, I mean, just simply grab a fake squat, grab an air squat right now, grab an air bar and push your elbows out. What do you feel your whole body doing? You feel it tilting forward a little bit. So if you're in the middle of grinding out a squat and those elbows are out here, it's gonna wanna tilt you forward even more and make you fall forward in the squat, especially with a low bar squat when you're already tilting forward. So keeping those elbows cocked under you, suddenly you feel a lot more able to drive the body straight up towards the ceiling instead of folding over. So that's the other benefit of keeping the elbows tight and cocked. So now when unracking, one of the first mistakes people make, they find their positioning, they keep their upper back nice and tight like we just described, cool, but they keep their body really loose. So they'll be wedged into the bar, but their body's sitting here chilling, there's no pressure on their feet. I mean, they could be tap dancing. And then so they'll go all amped up, stomp their feet, get under it, hips are super loose, and then go 0 to 1,000 and try to jack that bar off the pegs immediately. What you wanna do is load the weight. Load your body underneath the barbell. Get that barbell engaged, get your legs and body engaged under the barbell as if you're already squatting the weight. So when you see me set up with an empty bar, I usually when I warm up I go right into 135 because the bar is usually too light for me to set up adequately on. So when I do try to set up at the bar, I'm getting so tight and I'm driving against this rack and I'm so loaded and ready to go, the bar has a hard time staying down. And it's all coming from the feet, the glutes. I'm driving my hips into my torso the same way you would on a squat, but I'm loaded and I'm ready to go from the second I'm under the bar. I'm not loose here at all. I then put my foot forward under the bar. Foot number 2 goes under the bar. You can see the bar wants to leave the pegs. Both feet are under the bar. They're not back here behind me. That's another big mistake people make. They'll either try to unrack from behind the bar and they do a good morning up. Not good at all because you're using your posterior chain, your back, your glutes. You're basically deadlifting the bar up or good morning it up, using so much energy that could be going into your squat. It's also less safe. Another mistake is putting one foot forward and standing up with one foot. It's just less stable. All that weight is suddenly going onto just one leg. You're opening yourself up for injury, and again, you're using more energy than needed. So driving that bar into our backs, sucking it in with our lats, nice and tight. Both feet go under the bar. Look, even 135 still wants to lift off because of how much I'm driving. I'm tight, I'm ready to go. And I'm not craning my back up. My feet are here. All I'm doing is I'm sliding my hips under me and I'm completing a rep. This is just the final portion of a regular rep. Boom, and that's how it should be. When you're getting those hips under there, you don't want to pull the bar up to your hips. You don't want to pull the bar to being in line with your hips. You want to have your hips come forward. You want those hips to be the thing that is literally leveraging your torso up. Just like locking out a deadlift. When you lock out a deadlift, you're pushing the hips forward into the bar. That's what's standing your torso up. So that's the same thing you're doing here. So if there was a piece of tape going across this rack right here at hip level, and I'm setting up. As I stand this weight up off the rack, my hips are punching through and smacking into that tape. So you need to treat the unrack like it's rep number 1 of your set, okay? So once you get your back into position and you're pushing and those glutes and posterior chain is loaded and they're ready to spring this bar up into action, before you shoot your hips under it, you need to inhale big air and brace that core. Try to break your belt by making your stomach super fat. Just like that, your first rep. Imagine you have a giant balloon. It's deflated, it's flat. You're laying things down on top of it. And then you go and you blow up that balloon, it expands, and whatever's on top of it gets lifted up into the air because the balloon's blowing up. That's what you're doing with the bar here, okay? The belt is your ground, you're breathing into your belt, it's expanding your whole torso like a balloon, and all that energy and pressure is just lifting the barbell up on top of your expanding body. That's how you want to envision it. Now, when I stand it up, I exhale right away. Some people might stand it up and hold their breath through the walkout. That's optional. That can be a good idea because it maintains a lot of tightness while you take those steps, and those steps should be baby steps. For me personally, I just feel more comfortable getting a big brace of air, standing up, and letting that air out like I would at the top of a rep. Then I do re-brace. I don't take a full inhale, but I get that stomach punched nice and tight as I take those steps back, like a mini brace basically. And again, that's just me. But either way, no matter what, once you're walked out, regardless of what your style was, take a second to let the air out and reset. Brand new breath of air before you start that first rep. Make those steps tiny. You don't want to be walking way out like this. You don't want to be taking more than 3 steps. So 1 small step, 2 small step. If you need to take a third, that's fine. It shouldn't be any more than that. And still close aim to the rack, good to go.
So outwardly, it might look like I am sitting my hips back first to start the rep, but realistically, I am actually sitting my hips back and bending my knees at the same exact time. Hips and knees start moving exactly at the same time, and that's how you want to do it. Now, you'll hear cues like open the taint, which is to open your legs up and just sit downward, and those are good cues and they're accurate, but for me, I had trouble with that because I was so quad dominant and so good at like front squats, I would end up not loading my hips enough. I wouldn't load my posterior chain. So I would go down and then my hips ended up shooting up behind me like this. So a trick I learned was to do a stiff leg good morning, and once I couldn't bend anymore at the hips, then squat down. Onto a box even helps even more.
Here's a funny way to think about how to move in a low bar squat, because most of us are not used to squatting starting with a hinged hip tilting forward like this. It's very weird for us. So here's out a picture. Imagine you're gonna give someone a piggyback ride, right? But their legs are gonna stay straight the whole time. They're staying planked the entire time, right? So what would you do? You'd get your hips underneath their hips for leverage, right? And then you'd stand up with your hips. And now their legs are out back, so I can't stand up straight, otherwise her legs will hit the ground on me. So if I wanted to squat with her, I'd have to keep these hips hinged, keep my torso in this angle, and squat down just like this. Now this is a funny, exaggerated way to do it, but it's a good way to kind of mentally picture like you're about to carry a very heavy table. Here are the legs. You're grabbing the legs and you're putting the table over your back like this, and then you have to squat down with it. That's how you're moving with hinged hips.
Squat down with your hands together, drive your knees open with your elbows. This squatted position with your knees forced open is what the bottom of a low bar squat should look and feel like. Note the angle of my back and shins.
Okay, last but not least, when I'm all walked out, and I'm about to take my first rep, right? And I go to brace. I'm doing a few things here. First, like we said, we're pushing all that air down and outward, right? We're trying to force that air in our stomach down through the bottom of our crotch and out to explode our belt. Show me how fat you can make your stomach look, down and out. We're also taking our rib cage and we're pushing our rib cage down into our belt and out as well. So ribs are getting forced down into the belt. Put your ribs into the belt, push that stomach out. So now we're nice and compressed. We're making our torso as short as possible, like an accordion. Now the final thing I do is holding that, I also pull my chest upward to the wall in front of me. And I also bring my head upward as if someone has a string attached to the top of my head and they're pulling it up towards the ceiling like this. Now you don't want to crank your neck and look upward. You're simply pulling your head back into your neck. Pull your head into your neck. So your head's gonna be nice and neutral, looking straight forward now along with your chest. So what this is gonna do is everything's being crunched downward. Ribs, stomach down and out, chest and head up, and this is gonna create just a nice, neutral, natural arc in your spine. It's gonna keep your spine straight and strong and compressed, but it's gonna allow you to stay upright and keep those hips behind you during a low bar squat. You don't wanna force a curve in your back. We're not trying to twerk. So don't arch your back like you're benching. That's called hyperextension. That'll make you weak. You don't wanna do that. It's also dangerous for your spine. We're just keeping it compressed and we're just bringing out that natural curve in the spine by simply lifting our chest up and cocking our head back into our neck like this while our ribs and stomach are down and out. Just like that. So I'll take my time at the top and at the bottom, and those will be our money shots.
Okay, perfect.
Third time's the charm.